and good evening. Welcome to the Business of Property. I'm your host, Cheryl Leong for Property Development Australia. I begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we virtually meet today and pay my respects to elders past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. So at the Business of Property, we interview superstar guests in the property development space that share their expertise, their deals, their stories to help empower, build, and grow our community of property developers. And hello to Facebook land, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Anyone that's here, I'd love for you to drop me a hello, and I can see it in the comments. Today we have Scott Aggett from Hello House, who is a master negotiator. He is not a stranger to the business of property. We have had him here last week talking about all things negotiation. However, I wanted to bring him on today because we are in very interesting times, as you know, really hot market, and the thing on every developer's sort of top of their head going, how do we negotiate with vendors in such a hot market? And in particular, how do we secure off-market deals? So I'm going to bring Scott on board, but I just want to sort of quickly give him a quick intro. Scott is background is in real estate. However, he moved on and he is specifically focused just purely on negotiation. His unique combination of professional and personal real estate success has made him an absolute enviable resource in contract negotiations. So if you're buying or an investor or a developer, he's going to share some fantastic sort of golden nuggets here that you can use in your negotiation toolbox. So without further ado, Scott, I'd love to have you join me on Business of Property Dance Floor.
Hi, thank you for the welcome. How you doing?
Very, very well, Scott. Well, it is interesting times indeed, Scott, and everyone's going, how do we get in?
Well, it's a land of opportunity, this big brown land of ours. There's, no matter how hot the market is, there's plenty of opportunity. So hopefully we can give everyone that's listening a few little tips and takeaways that they can easily apply themselves on the hunt for the next property and make sure they make it a winner.
Absolutely. And so that we're absolutely clear and our audience is clear, Scott, tell us what it is that you do. Are you a real estate agent? Are you a buyer's agent? Please don't shoot me. What do you really do? And just so that everyone knows from the beginning.
I drink a lot of beer on the sofa watching sport. That's why I'm best at. What I do, I'm an
things that you get paid to do. Yes.
Yeah, I wish I got paid to do that. I did yesterday watching the Super Bowl, which was good. But focusing on business for a second, I am an ex-agent, as you said, of 25 years. I was a principal of the first 3 Belle Property franchises in Sydney's eastern suburbs. So very familiar in residential and a little bit of commercial and development negotiation, both on the buy side and the sell side. From my own personal journey, I'm up to property 29. So I've been developing and flipping properties in Sydney, London, Japan, Gold Coast. So I've been pretty active in that space as well. And I'm currently building 2 luxury homes on the Gold Coast at the moment, as well as doing my negotiation business, which is the flagship business that I have that's been running now for about 3.5 years. And that business was born out of a lack of transparency that I saw in the real estate market. And I know it's a bugbear of everyone that's buying and selling property across Australia. It's the constant feedback that we all get, that there's not much trust and there's absolutely no transparency in that process. So I built a business that works with buyers who have got the ability to find their own property before I step in and ensure they buy it at the best possible terms. And how I charge, that's very different to anyone else that's in that industry in terms of a buyer's agent, which I go to great lengths to say that I'm not. I charge differently. I get your client to set me a target price, and then I charge a percentage of the savings that I make them. So I live and die by the sword in terms of the negotiation and my results. And yeah, it's been a breath of fresh air, really great 3.5 years. And that's working also really well on agent selecting for people that are selling properties or selling development sites as well.
Yeah, fantastic. So, Scott, as I mentioned, our audience are predominantly either investors, but predominantly we've got developers here. And developers, we really want to know, how are they, the tips around negotiating, not with just agents, but homeowners as well. Those of us that are starting out in the space, probably with agents, not too bad. You're sort of used to going, all right, well, asking these questions and so on. But actually talking with vendors and homeowners might be a little bit more daunting because sometimes they're a little bit more closed off and sometimes you don't know what's going on and how do you really cut through to what it is that they really want. So let's start off with agents, okay? How do we build relationships with agents so that we're going to be the first on their speed dial to call when they've got a particular development site?
Sure. Okay. Well, that was a mouthful of a question, but in terms of
Then we start off with
we got
the
there. We got there. We got there. Well, look, I'll start with an easy stat, which is probably known to a lot of your developers, but it's really important because I think that gives us the framework to sort of unpack everything from here. The stats say that approximately 40% of properties sell off market. So a lot of the work that we'll talk about is trying to find those opportunities, because finding those opportunities first is going to limit competition, and competition and days on market is what increases price. So if you want to buy cheaper, you want to buy faster, and you want to see more of the market, up to 40% more of the market, then you've got to do the hard yards to build rapport with agents, or have a really well thought through strategy, and certainly scripts and dialogues and things to back that up when you're talking to private sellers that you might be approaching to sell to you off market directly, and lose having to pay an agent's fee altogether. So to answer the question, how to stay top of mind, how to build rapport with agents is really down to just showing up, Cheryl. I think it's repetition. Like you go to the gym and you're pumping weights to build muscle memory. It's exactly the same with my approach in terms of dealing with key agents in my marketplace. But if we unwind that a step and you start with yourself, I think the most important thing and the key to the success for me finding things off market for my own sites has been really identifying what I want to achieve before I start out. So rather than just go with a scattergun approach, looking at a broad market and certainly looking in more than one or two suburbs, which is a quick death, or a very slow, long, painful death is probably more accurate, because you'll just have analysis paralysis looking in too many areas and you won't have rapport with those key agents. If you start with the key metrics that are going to drive your decision making, that allows me to then really go approach the correct agents that I know sell those types of properties, and then start to have real conversations with them based on my timeline, my finance capacity, and what I'm going to do with the property and what my plans are. So when I've got that framework to start with, that gives me a really good step to then approach those agents and start to see some opportunities come to fruition. But the key for me for buyers is where they let themselves down is
Mm.
the repetition, as we said, but communication. So they can't communicate clearly to an agent what they're looking for. But when the agents do give them options and put things in front of them, they either don't turn up when they're going to say they turn up, or they're too slow in responding, or they crucially don't give the agent the buyer feedback that they need on that property to allow the agent to get their job done in servicing or conditioning their vendor to get that property to market, or to from A to B to get it sold. So if you can think what the agent's going through, if you can service their needs as best as possible, that's going to create more opportunity for you, because they want to get their job done. They want to get paid. And in doing so, if you're giving them feedback, it's going to fine tune what you're looking for. They'll have a better understanding of what it is that floats your boat for your next site. And that will allow them to put the right properties in front of you and not waste your time.
Yeah, I love these tips that you're sharing, because I mean the main thing that keeps coming up is just how do you keep front of mind with these agents? Because at the end of the day, the agent wants to sell, and so you're putting
Yep.
yourself in their shoe. The agent wants to sell. If you look like you're interested and you look like you're consciously making an effort to come up with some sort of an offer or whatever it is that you're doing, particularly if it's due diligence, then they're going to at least think, all right, this person is not sort of just, you know, mucking
Time
around.
waster,
Yeah.
tie kicker. Yeah, a lot of as I sat in that agent seat, a lot of what I'm telling you now is born out of that experience that I had on the other side of the fence, right, as an agent. So many developers that I would talk to, you'd give them opportunities, you ask them questions. They were terrible communicators. They never called you back. They're busy doing other things, but that just basically put a brick wall up between me and future
Mm,
opportunities for them. So I think you've got to be a really good high-level communicator. And if you can do that, just even if you keep it very simple in terms of what the metrics are, that will go a long way. But in terms of staying top of mind and building rapport with agents, what an easy takeaway tip for everyone tonight is, we discussed already, focusing on 1 to 2 suburbs as a maximum. I think beyond that is very difficult. Sometimes, depending on where you're developing, that can be very limiting. And I understand that you've got to put the boundaries further to throw the net wider and see more opportunities if there's not enough stock coming to market. But generally speaking, you want to be an expert in that 1 to 2 suburbs, because you can see the standout sales, the out-of-line sales, and you can see the value in certain properties very quickly without having to do a feasibility over and over and over again in new suburbs for different types of asset classes. So if you can really focus on one type of property as best you can, that will really streamline the whole process for you. But when you do that and you analyze a marketplace and you're prepared to spend time in that marketplace, it's quite easy to look at who the key players are. Now, whether you're on real commercial or you're on domain or real estate, you can see who the main agents are that sell those types of products or those types of assets. What I would do is I'd be writing those into a BCC email, copying them all their email addresses, putting it into a BCC email, and sending that to them on a regular basis with exactly those key metrics. And mine, in this last instance, when I just bought on the Gold Coast, was $2 million, knocked down, finance approved, east of the easement, Mermaid Beach. Now, any agent worth their salt in my core market knows exactly what that means. Okay, so I'm only talking to people that are going to get those listings, right? So there might be 10, there might be 20 of those agents. You only have to do it once. It might take you 20 minutes. Get all their email addresses, which are always advertised online. Put that BCC email together. Every time you're ready to buy, flush that out. Just get that out to your network and then stay in touch with these people as well. I call them, I SMS them, I chase them. So I'm the one that's really hounding them for opportunity, and they know I'm looking. They absolutely probably get sick of me, is the honest truth, because I chase them that much, and then opportunities come out of the woodwork.
Yeah, and we, we remind people, who are going into the development space, this is called the business of property for the main reason that you've got to look at it as a business. And as a business, if you're trying to attract particular product or stock or whatever, it is all about the follow-up, the follow-up, the follow-up, because it's, for a lot of agents, it's just about timing. Because obviously you put something out to a whole lot of agents, you're not necessarily going to get something right now, but it might be 2 weeks from now, it might be four weeks. So I like that tip around being one, focused in the area, building those core relationships as well, and simple things like emailing regularly. If you've got to do it every week, that's fine, because it just might not be timing. And I'd love to hear sort of your experience with securing your property. Was that off market as well, Scott?
Yeah. So, I mean, I applied effectively what I've just said to you, except because I've got a long-standing relationship now, having done this for 5.5 years in the same postcode, I've honed my skill set over that time. And I've also understood each project I've gone through. I've made a mental note of what I've done wrong, what I could have done better, what type of asset will work better in terms of a higher profit margin for me, what's safer, what's dangerous, so on and so forth, like all developers should do over time as they hone their craft. So I don't have to do as much of the BCC email anymore, because I've got that 5 years plus of traction with the same regular set of agents that are active. So what I did this time, I bought in November or August actually, but had a 90-day, 3-month settlement. So settled in November. I did exactly what I said to you in terms of a short list with key metrics of what I wanted. I just SMS'd 4 or 5 agents that I knew. Within weeks of having my finance approval, probably within 1 week of having my finance approval, I had 4 development sites off market in booming Miami and Mermaid Waters and Mermaid Beach. This is where stock levels were an all-time low. Last year in 2021, Mermaid Waters went up 46%. I think Miami did 40%. And Mermaid Beach did 53% for house prices. So it couldn't be an any busier marketplace, but within 1 week, I had 4 off-market opportunities of development sites that I don't believe anyone else was actively talking to. They may have had other buyers, but they weren't telling me that there was, so I didn't feel like I had competition. So what I did is just do an analysis of all 4. So did a back of the page or back of the envelope FISO on all 4 of them, and then just started offering. And I'd make verbal offers on properties really quickly and use the leverage of those other properties and those against those other agents. and just to see which one came to the top as the best deal. And the one that came out ended up being not quite out of left field, but it wasn't on my radar until probably the end of the week. But then it was just such a good standout deal as I went through and worked my way through the other three that was the one for me to buy.
Yeah. Again, love that story because everyone sort of says there's no stock on the market, and it's just really around that consistency there, and those relationships. For what are the other things? You mentioned a three-month settlement, so everyone wants a delayed settlement when it comes down to development sites. What are some good tips as to the agent wants to get paid as soon as possible, the developer wants to drag it up as long as possible, depending on what the seller needs, it's sort of in between. What are some good ways to get as much of that, settlement time as possible, but still have the agent on your side?
Well, it's understanding the seller's motivation and how much rope you've got to how far you can really push the offer, right? So I ask a series of detailed questions to establish the timing of the sale. And that's not just, are they ready to sell now? Because that's a really important question. Are they ready to sell? If I do a FISO, if I do, whatever it might have been, evaluation, it might have been a building and pest report. If I'm going to go spend money, time, and effort to try and buy this property, is your client ready to sell? That's a really important question because sometimes I say, do you know what? They're not. They want to see market. They want to come to market. They're not ready to sell. So you could put $4 million on it when it's worth $2 million, and they're still not going to sell until they test the water. So you've got to ask questions like that. And then I just try and work out, in this one, if you want to use mine as a case study, they had a tenant in there until early November. I wanted vacant possession. I wanted a long time to go for subdivision. There's an express DA subdivision with Gold Coast Council. So I asked the vendor as part of my offer that we had 90 days. I had vacant possession, so there was no tenant issues at the end because they'd been there for a very long time, and I didn't want that to drag on my watch. I wanted to develop it as quickly as possible. I wanted the vendor's permission that they'd sign the express DA so I could lodge on their behalf on their lot. And I managed to get subdivision approval in 7 days in between exchange and settlement. So I contracted the property at $2 million and then subdivided one into two and probably added $1 million worth of value between exchange and settlement.
Yeah.
So that was a really, really good opportunity. But
really just a paper approval.
Yeah, $2,000 in 7 days. Yeah. So I mean, it's an opportunity that's just sitting there, and it was a 90-plus-year-old owner. They built the house in, I think, 1970s. They paid about $10,000 for the land. It wasn't about the absolute best price for them. They just wanted it to be made really easy. So they didn't care about a long settlement. They'd owned it forever and it owed them no money. They were happy to see the tenant stay there till the end of the lease, so they didn't have to kick their tenant out. I gave them their deposit up front. No, I didn't release it, but I just made sure I gave them a reasonable deposit. And I just gave them the confidence that I was going to complete on the deal and there wasn't any issues and I knew what I was doing. So it was all done reasonably quickly. And it turned out to be a really good outcome, which is great.
Yeah, good stuff. Let's move on to sellers. Oh, we've got your mate Jeff here. He says you're the GOAT of negotiation.
Thanks,
For those
Chair.
of you who don't know what GOAT means, he's not slinging off at Scott. It means the greatest of all time. I didn't know what that was. Someone put that in the comments and something, and I just went, what?
Thanks, Jeff. I'll pay you the $20 tomorrow.
Yeah, that's it. Is that all? Negotiate. What's the difference between negotiating with the agent and negotiating with the seller?
Yeah, well, I guess negotiating with an agent, you need to understand what their rules of engagement are in terms of how they're going to run the process. So, every agent's going to do it differently. I'm buying a property at the moment in Elizabeth Bay in Sydney, and I asked the agent there yesterday on behalf of a client, how are you going to run this process? It's prior to auction. I'm going to try and buy the property. What's the deal? Everyone does it differently. He said, okay, well, I'm going to wait to get your offer. I'll only put forward an unconditional offer to my client because it's prior to auction. I'm then going to do a call around. I won't disclose your price and we'll sell to the highest bidder. And I said, okay, that's totally fine. I'm happy with that. But can you, if I start this process with an offer that's strong enough, can you give me the last right of refusal so that I can beat every other offer and I can't lose? And he said, yeah, absolutely. That's fair. So right then I've just positioned myself really in an unlosable position if my client's got the money. It's just one question, right? It could have been the difference between us bidding in the dark and having no idea if we were going to win at the end, or not even getting another opportunity, or basically being told, Scott, it's yours. You just got to beat 2.85 million. It's done. And then I just pay the price within the parameters my client wants to spend, and job done. So asking questions of how they're going to run the process is crucial. Are they going to take it to Saturday and run it open for inspection? Are they happy to take an unconditional offer to their client this afternoon? What terms do they want? You got to ask a lot of different questions like that, because for the reasons that you just said, the agents want to get paid straight away. So if they've got a buyer saying they can do it in 4 weeks versus you saying you want 3 months, you need to know that. You need to ask that question, and you want to be a clear communicator and talk about those things openly, because if you go ahead and put your offer in, all your eggs are in one basket on a 90-day settlement, and they turn around and go, thank you, but we've gone with the guy at 30 days because the vendors had already committed to purchase elsewhere and they needed the money fast, and we took 50 grand less. Yeah. And you could have settled in 4 weeks as well.
Because they said that they weren't going to disclose the price or terms or anything else, but you almost turned it around and said, can I have a first right of refusal once you get to the top, which indirectly meant that they're going to have to tell you what the top
Pretty
offer
much.
is.
And most agents do in that situation. They shouldn't do, because they're doing a disservice to their client. And it doesn't always play out that way. It's not as simple as that. Sometimes the agent will say, no, I don't do it like that. We're not doing it. On your terms, I'll control this. But you don't know if you don't ask. So I always just ask those questions. And that's crucial. So really being structured in terms of that works on the agent side. And it's the same really on the selling side, because if you're talking about approaching private sellers, there's really two types of private sellers. Those ones that have put their hand up to say, I'm interested in selling. And I'd say that falls into the camp more of almost pre-market, right? Even if they're 6 months or 3 months before they actually plan on listing it with an agent. Those ones typically have been speaking to agents. They've got an idea of what's happening with their property. They've got a fair idea of where the market's at and what the asset might be worth. And there's a different way to approach those sellers, those private sellers, as there is with a private seller who's got no intent to sell. So you've really got to build trust. You've got to build rapport. You've got to take your time with those sellers. You can't bulldoze those people. Even if you said the property was worth $1 million and you're offering them 1.1, if they're not motivated to sell, it doesn't matter how much money you keep putting on the table, you're never going to get through. And I've seen this happen, hundreds of times. If the seller's not ready to sell, they won't sell, unless you pay stupid overs, and you don't want to be that person paying stupid overs. So you've really got to be careful with that. So I think the way to do it with those second type of private sellers is to make sure that you go to great lengths to have a strong idea of the market value of that asset. So you've done all the research already on your comparable sales. You've done a rough FISO that's really close based on that asset. If you're going to knock it down, or you're going to 1 into 2 or whatever it might be, or a major renovation, you should have a fair idea of the condition that it's in just from old photos or the last time they bought it. That's going to give you a really good guide to do a FISO up front. And the reason I think that's really important when you're approaching a private seller is because they want to know that you're legit. So if you come to them and say, listen, it's probably sitting between 9 and $1 million. I've run my feasibility. This is what I plan to do with the property and over this time frame. So I'd like, you're really clear communicating with what your motives are and why you've approached them. And I think that I can probably get you to $1.05 million or even 1.1 without any agent's costs, because this is what I plan to do the property. This is what I believe is the highest and best use of the property. If I could do that and I can walk you through those steps, would you be happy to keep talking to me? That type of approach is way better than going, hey, we're just building down the road and we want yours and we can smash it together, and we'll give you $950 with no agent's fees. And, it's $1 million minus 25 grand, minus 10 grand for marketing, minus the hassle factor. And people don't think like that. Sellers don't think like that, but buyers think like that. And it's stupid. So you need to get out of that mindset and work with the person to try and come up and formulate a plan that's going to be tolerable to them and attractive enough for them to trade.
Yeah. And one thing that I always remember, they're always thinking, what's in it for me? They're not interested in what you're going to get. They're just going, is it satisfying my needs of this, and this? I want to go on a holiday or whatever that might be.
And if you don't give them enough information, they just think, oh, you're going to make a fat profit out of this. So, he's just lowballing me on price. So that's why I think if you're really organized, you can show them, look, the highest and best use of this is 1 into 2. And the cost of doing that, materials and the rest of it is going to be this. So Any
Mm.
developer is going to be looking for this type of margin, and that's why the value of your home will fall into this sort of category. Happy to pay you money in that category, in that zone. But beyond that, it's going to be, going to an end user who might buy it to live in, and they're probably going to see value at this level because here's the comparable sales data. So I think if you approach it like that, and you can explain to people that you aren't trying to rip them off and you're giving them a fair price, if there's truly value in that site, then that's worth doing. And now, if you have to keep throwing money at them to get them out of the house, I'd say that you're looking at the wrong asset. You possibly have to scratch your head and look at it and go, do you know what? This is just, it's just upping the risk on the site if you have to keep chewing away at your margins. So there's plenty of other fish in the sea. At that point, I would probably jog on and find another one.
Yeah, don't suffer from FOMO. And this may seem quite obvious, but what are some of the benefits of selling privately?
Selling privately, well, the obvious ones we kind of just touched on just then is there's no agents fees, no marketing costs. In COVID right now, for a lot of sellers, they don't want people in their house, or they haven't done. That may change over the next 3 to
Mm.
6 months. But at the moment, that's been a big one. People don't want open for inspections. A lot of people
Yeah.
have got nice artwork, nice furniture, a bitey dog. They don't want open for inspections. They don't want people going through their private things. Some people have got tenants that are really difficult to work around. They don't want to sell their asset while the property's tenanted because it's not going to present at the highest.
Yeah.
There's a myriad of reasons with why you would sell off market, but the
Yeah.
main one is the motivation around ease and
Mm.
the feeling that they can't beat that price if they go to market. So if you offer them all of the ease and a really compelling offer, it's attractive, right? For most people to say, well, actually, this is a turnkey offer. It's really easy. We don't really have to go to much work here. There's no cash flow issues if we have to get the tenant out and it sits vacant for 3 months or 6 months if it doesn't sell, or with a long settlement to a developer, especially if it's on a put and call or something like that, where they've potentially got no income for a long period and it could fall over in 6 months' time or 18 months' time. So all of those things are motivation. So you've got to package up that offer by asking all of their motivational questions. Why you want to sell, if they've put their hand up. What time do you want to sell?
Yeah.
Are you ready to sell today? What price do you want? What do you think the highest and best use of this property is? Because they've got their own opinion. Sometimes they've been there for 30 years. It's their own principal place of residence and they're very close to it. So start to ask questions, listen. Good negotiation is about great listening. So ask lots of questions, build rapport the whole time you're listening. And what I do is I mentally record all those things and then I feed it back to them in the form of basically an unconditional offer, or as clean as possible offer. Get rid of all the landmines or the speed humps, make the offer as clear as possible, and you just go tick, 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 tick through their list of wants. And it's very difficult to compete against that. If another buyer comes along and tries to jam an offer down their face and says, I want 6 months, I want to put and call, I want this, I want that, they just go, well, someone else has approached me last week and they didn't have any of these things and they were really lovely and they're nice to deal with. And that's probably the direction we want to go in.
Yeah. How do you deal with objections? So if people are going, you might need an extended settlement, but the owner's going, oh, I don't know if I can do an extended settlement. How would you deal with that? I'd like to do a little bit of a sort of a dummy
A role play.
role play. That's it.
Yeah. Well, if you did that, I'd slam the door in your face. No, I wouldn't do that. I would, I would come up with solutions, Cheryl. I would come up with solutions. So the solutions might be, okay, well, if you don't want a long settlement, we could skin it a different way. So what about if we settled in the time frame that you want, but because of that, I've got to take on more risk, so I'm going to lower the price slightly, or I might need you to give me the rent that the tenants are paying between exchange and settlement. There's a million different things that you could workshop in that space to say, okay, well, if you want a shorter settlement, there has to be a bit of, give and take. So I might need you to give me access to be on site for that whole time to start my soil tests. I might need to get a surveyor through or a valuer through. I might want to get my architect to measure up and utilize that time frame between exchange and settlement. So if they want those things, then you need to balance that as best you can and be fair about it, but come up with alternative solutions. So you should be armed with those things like I am here to say, okay, well, hang on, there's an objection. What am I going to do? How do I respond to that on the run? So if you know your stock, what you're looking for, and you know what
Mm.
your alternatives are, then
Yes.
you can chop and change to make it work for everybody as best you can.
What are the blocks? And also understanding why they're not keen on the longer settlement. And is that because they do want to, they've got these dreams of buying a Winnebago and driving
Yeah.
around half Australia, which depending on the price of the land, say if they've got, acreage and it's $5 million and a Winnebago is, I don't know, 200, whatever, it could be that you could still go, oh, why don't we release some deposit and then the rest of it, so you can still buy your Winnebago. And so really, I get, going down to the understanding the why and then coming up with the different solutions and being creative about that.
Absolutely. I put a site together late last year, which sold for north of 15 mil, and I acted on behalf of the sellers and negotiated with multiple different property developers. And all of them are coming with these long conditional contracts. They wanted a short, unconditional contract.
Yes.
All the developers wanted to do the lowest deposit possible.
Yes.
And again, make it all conditional on their DA and long DD terms and the rest of it. And what we ended up doing was negotiating a fair middle ground. So instead of 18 months to 2.5 years, I got an 18-month settlement. I got an unconditional contract exchange. I got a 30% deposit released to the vendor. And that enabled them to then go on and buy the family house that they wanted to next and to utilize that time. So even if the deal falls over, which I doubt it will, it's unconditional,
Mm,
they've already got a huge chunk of the money out of it. And there's a lot of hurt money in it for the developer. So just
mm,
little things like that, you can skin it different ways. And
mm.
it just depends on the circumstances of the seller or the buyer.
So for that developer, because that comes up very often, you've got vendors who want the shortest settlement, right? It's it's part of an estate. The children are just like, I just want to sell it, but it's a development site. In that particular situation, how did you manage to get that middle ground? Was it mainly because you found there was a standout developer who was willing to ask those questions, or was it mainly because they had an amazing negotiator, i.e., Scott, who was able to sort of dig that out of your
Um,
developer?
I think it was just falling back on that set of questions, right? So I understood by asking a lot of questions to my seller what
Mm,
was the primary driver for them selling. They'd been there for 40 years. They've
yeah.
been bombarded by developers trying to buy their land, which had been rezoned. They had no pressure really in selling today or selling in 5 years' time. So they wanted to sell on their terms. And
Mm,
their terms were very specific. They wanted to get, if they were going to sell, they wanted to get the money out and disperse it between the family, almost exactly what you just said just then, between
mm,
3 children. So they had a number of developers to deal with. We had offers between 12 mil and 18 mil. And we ended up going for an offer that was less money, still a really good offer, less money though, but way better terms. So they
mm,
wanted security. If they were going to go into this, all their neighbors had sold with these conditional contracts that tied them in for 2.5 years with no,
yes.
no surety or certainty that it was going to happen. So we shortened that period, went unconditional, and had a huge deposit release. So it was just a way, way better outcome for them. And for the
Yeah.
developer, they were going to buy it anyway. They were buying the surrounding properties. So it was just a matter of really dragging it out with them, the negotiation, until they realized that the only way to get this person out of the house was to front up the better terms. So they had to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't know if you
But
can
that
hear
comes
this.
back to knowing what you want to buy, right? So for them, they knew exactly what they wanted to buy. So they had to
Yes.
give up some flexibility because it was that asset that they wanted. So in some ways, they were backed into a corner. They
Mm,
didn't have to buy it, but it just made sense for their business plan to buy it. So,
yeah.
knowing that helped us negotiate it, but it also helped them realize really quickly that, okay, this is just one of those ones we're going to have to suck it up. Normally, we don't have to do these terms, but we're just going to have to put more cash into this deal and get on board with it straight away. And because they knew their market so well and they were developing there actively, they knew exactly what they could get out of the site, what all their margins were, all their costs. So it was a reasonably easy decision for them. They just had to work out the cash flow element of it.
Yeah. From just our discussion, I see how many the similarities between sort of a sales process, a great sales process, and a great negotiation process in terms of going. Let's because obviously you've come from the sales side, and hence you've been able to sort of apply your knowledge. Going, I can come from the defense because it's almost sort of attack and defense.
Yeah.
That you're addressing all the objections, so all the reasons why a vendor might not want to sell, and then going, okay, well, if I did this, and turning their objections into a yes. And that's how you're working towards what we call sort of that ultimate offer, how you can craft this sort of almost unconditional offer.
Yeah, and I think negotiation is a honed skill, right? It's a learnt skill over many, many, many years. So this is something that I've done, as I said, for over 25 years. It's because I've done 3,000 plus property deals that I understand, and having sat on the vendor seat, the agent seat, and the buyer's seat, and the developer seat, if you like, as well. I have, had so much experience, especially in the agent seat, of saying to a buyer, this isn't going to work for these reasons, and then working out how they respond to how that deal ends up eventuating. So I've learned over the years that, okay, well, if you get that response, then this is the highest percentage chance that you can apply against that response to get a result. So I've just learnt this, and it's a process of elimination, right? Like, some buyers will throw things at me and I just automatically think, that's not going to work. That's a stupid thing to say in that situation. What would have worked is if you came at it from that angle and you pieced it together like this, and then I'm sure there's some common ground and we can make this work. It's a hard thing to explain, but it's definitely a learnt skill. One thing I say to a lot of my clients when I'm speaking like this is, having sat in that agent seat for so long, one of the, I think, big benefits of using someone like me to negotiate a deal for you is that I know what the agent's going to say before they say it in a lot of instances. And it's because they're so well drilled in the same skill, scripts and dialogues, that I can almost pick what they're going to say and when they're going to say it. And I know when they say a particular thing, what that means behind the scenes. Like, if this scenario played out, I would have said this if I was the agent to the buyer, because I know that would get an outcome, right? Because it's practice over the years. If I say that, they're going to do this, and that's going to get the deal done. So that's why you get a lot of bluffing the rest of it. So I'm able to navigate around that agent bullshit, because I know when they're going to throw me a line and why they threw it and what it means. And that's, I think, what most buyers just don't have that level of experience. If you're buying a property once a year, once every 7 years or 10 years, whatever the average is nationally, you can't pretend that you know these skills. Real estate isn't a game where you want to learn from your mistakes and practice. You're dealing with massive financial, assets here, some of the biggest assets that you'll ever play with in your life. It's not a game to play around with. Like, you can very easily, overpay by 20 grand, 50 grand, 200 grand, $2 million. And it's not something that you want to play with just because you don't, you've got an ego and you think you can do this yourself. You're going up against a skilled professional person who trains daily or weekly with scripts and dialogues to get you to pay an emotional premium, and they work for the seller against you. So if you know that going into it, you are a brave person if you think you can out-negotiate an agent who does this all day. So that's why I think you really got to think about this before you open your mouth, is that you really think about, can you finish this if you start this negotiation? Have you got the skills? Have you got the time and effort to put into it to finish it properly, or are you prepared to overpay? And a good agent, this is a scary thing, but a good agent basically trains to make you feel good that you didn't overpay. So, for an example, if I had a couple of people coming in to pay offers over $1 million, and Cheryl comes in and pays $1.6 million, and that's a great offer and the owners would accept it. And then, Jeff Mills comes in, Milesen comes in and pays, $1.76 million. Now, the first thing I say to Jeff is, Jeff, mate, you just got there. The other buyer was at $1.70 million. You won by $6 grand. It's so close. Congratulations, mate. You got there. He doesn't realize he just paid $70,000 too much. That's why when you go to a dinner party, you hear all the people talking about how much money they made in property. Rarely did anyone tell you how much money they lost in a negotiation, because they don't know. Agents will never tell you, right? It's in their vested interest to make you feel warm and fuzzy that you didn't overpay. So you've got to be so careful about this, because buyers are just getting rorted.
Well, it's a fine example. At an auction, the highest bidder, everyone's cheering.
Well, what about at an auction where the highest bidder and everyone's cheering, and then the owners don't accept it, and then it goes into a live negotiation on the floor, and the agent comes out and says, we haven't met reserve yet, you're going to have to bid against yourself? That happens every other auction. So
And
they want
like,
the public auction.
I'm
Everyone
so
puts their hands up.
conflicted. I'm like competing against myself.
You're bidding against yourself. Yeah. So this is where people just get carried away in a highly emotional state. And you've got to be very careful.
Yeah. And what I've noticed throughout this as well is just that that confidence in that negotiation process. And exactly like you said, whether it's an agent, whether it's a homeowner, if you do not come across that you're confident in what you're doing and what you're delivering, then they're gonna not. Well, that's not going to give them the confidence that well, you're going to be able to actually deliver the project as well.
Yes.
And
And
so
can you imagine how much uh, doubt would be in your mind if you're a developer knocking on the door, proposing a JV, for example, but you're completely disorganized, you haven't got a clue about the FISO, what you're going to build, and you're approaching them with that type of solution, it's just going to be laughed out the door. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So the great thing is that developers, buyers, you've got a choice now. You can don't have to think that you've got to go it alone. The great thing, Scott's done development. You understand that space. You can have someone that represents you. It doesn't mean you've got to engage a buyer's agent. If you want to engage a buyer's agent to find the site, cool. Ensure that they are master negotiators, because particularly with development sites, when there's obviously a lot of money that's involved, a lot of different terms, you've got to make sure that there's someone in there. If it's not you, someone who knows how to play that game, for want of a better word.
Yeah, and this business model that I've built with Hello House is deliberately competing against buyers agents, if you like. So I don't go out and find any property. I don't meet any clients. I don't advise anyone what they should buy or sell. Mine is specifically a niche service on negotiation, and typically it's about 1/5 of the cost of using a buyer's agent. So if your buyer's agent can find sites, build rapport with agents, find things off market, do all the data-driven research behind the reasons why you should buy it, understand the FISO, and out negotiate the agent or the private seller, great. Pay them the money if you're time poor and you can't do those things yourself. But otherwise, if you've got the ability to find your own property, which 98% of buyers in Australia do, then my service is deliberately pitched at those people who really need that niche service of negotiation. And I firmly don't believe that there's a buyer's agent, not one single person, that can do that whole spectrum, because they're all different things. They're all different skill sets. So I think you need to really ask those questions. Whoever you're going to use is, show me your negotiation prowess, show me your data-driven success, show me your understanding of developments and breaking down a FISO, and show me how you're going to find these sites off market. Otherwise, I can find these things on real estate or real commercial myself.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to get in contact with you, what's the best way, Scott?
The best way is probably just through the website or through any of the social media, which is hellohouse.co, and it's the German spelling, HAUS. So I'm pretty easy to find there, and always happy for people to pick my brain. If you need any advice on the run for free, reach out anytime. I'm always contactable and always really happy to engage and help people without charging anyone, until you obviously need my assistance to actually do a negotiation.
Amazing. Thank you. That was so full of golden nuggets there.
Yay.
Build report, repetition, communicate, be the expert. Just really, have that confidence in what you're doing. But if you don't, then you've got Scott to back you up there.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Scott, and everyone else that joined us today. I hope that you picked up some good little tips there to take into your next negotiation. If you're watching the replay and you do have any questions, make sure that you tag Scott in your comments and ask your questions, or PM him. He's on Facebook.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me again. Love it.
Take care and stay safe, everyone. Keep well, and we'll see you next time on The Business of Property. You can check us out, Cheryl Leong on YouTube. Subscribe. You can listen to all our past Business of Property episodes, and we shall see you next time. Bye.